In the mid-15th century, England was torn apart by a power struggle known as the Wars of the Roses. Two houses, Lancaster and York, vied for the throne, leading to a series of conflicts that would change the course of history. In 1461, Edward IV from the House of York was now king, and Henry VI from the House of Lancaster had been deposed. But Henry and those that supported him were still trying to get him back on the throne. The Lancasters held the mighty Bamburgh Castle, as well as Towton, Alnwick, and Dunstanburgh, and they had Scottish support. This was of great concern for Edward because this meant the Lancastrian forces could land along the coast and Scotland would be able to invade from the north. In 1462, Richard Neville, who was known as the Kingmaker, laid siege to Bamburgh Castle and took control of it. But the tides quickly turned when Margaret of Anjou, the wife of the deposed King Henry VI, landed with her son and a force of 2,000 French mercenaries near Alnwick, despite a storm that had scattered their ships. Her arrival reignited the Lancastrian cause in the north, and Bamburgh Castle was quickly handed back into the control of the Lancasters. Word soon reached Margaret that Edward was on the way, and she fled to Scotland. Bamburgh Castle was left to be defended by Sir Ralph Percy and Henry Beaufort, who was the Duke of Somerset. When Yorkist forces arrived, the castle was unable to withstand a long siege, and so, in December of 1462, the castle was again in York control, and the two men who had held the castle swore allegiance to Edward. Ralph Percy and his family were incredibly influential in the north, and Edward was keen to have their support, so Percy was made garrison commander of Bamburgh Castle. Just 3 months later, Percy switched sides and again rejoined the Lancastrian cause and gave the castle back to Margaret of Anjou. Soon, the Duke of Somerset also came back to the Lancastrian side. By 1464, the Lancasters held most of Northumberland, and Edward IV was determined to crush the remaining Lancastrian resistance, and so forces were dispatched. Bamburgh Castle at this point was under the command of Sir Ralph Grey. Grey had also switched sides from York to Lancaster the year earlier, and he was determined to hold out. On the 25th of June, 1464, Richard Neville, the Kingmaker, laid siege to Bamburgh Castle again. Neville first offered a deal that all men inside the castle would be given terms except a kinsman of the Kingmaker, Sir Humphrey Neville, and Ralph Grey. Grey adamantly and absolutely refused. Edward didn't want Bamburgh Castle destroyed because of its proximity to Scotland, so a further threat was made that if the siege continued and the Yorks were forced to use artillery, then one person of Bamburgh Castle's garrison would be executed each day. And so, the siege began. The Yorks brought incredibly powerful cannon with them that were named Newcastle and London, that were made of iron, and Dyson, that was made of brass. The cannon unleashed their fury in unison, marking the commencement of the artillery bombardment. The walls of Bamburgh Castle were reduced to rubble. It was said the bombardment was so severe that stones from the walls flew into the sea. Shots from the cannon named Dyson went through the chamber that Grey was in and knocked him unconscious, and he fell with the collapsing tower. The man who was second in command of Bamburgh Castle promptly surrendered. With Bamburgh's fall, Lancastrian power in Northumberland collapsed, and the 9-month siege marked the first time an English castle had ever fallen to cannon fire, signaling a new era in warfare and the decline of castle fortifications.